hapa. Hello, I'm Esther Githui Ewart. It's Tuesday, November 23rd. This is Africa 54.
A closer look at the Nigerian city struggling to recover without power amid a long-running battle with militants. Kenya's COVID-19 directive draws praise and criticism. And after a century and a half, Ethiopian artifacts return home.
We begin in West Africa. Amid a long-running battle against militants, the economy of Nigeria's Maiduguri is struggling after power lines were destroyed, cutting the northeastern city off from the national grid. Neka Chile has more.
The last 10 months have been the toughest in Gaba Zango's nearly 50-year career. He owns a printing press in Nigeria's northeastern Maiduguri. But amid a long-running battle against militants, his city of 800,000 people is cut off from the national grid. His business, like the rest in Maiduguri, is now dependent on expensive and polluting generators.
We used 2 generators in shift. But at that time, the gas was okay, the price of gas is okay, diesel. But now it has gone to an extent that every day, if we have to work, we have to buy 9,000 naira gas every day.
Maiduguri is the capital of Borno State, the epicenter of a 12-year battle against militants. In January, transmission lines were bombed, cutting the city's power. The lines were fixed and destroyed again within 48 hours. The next month, a repair vehicle hit an improvised explosive device, killing 1 soldier and injuring 3 workers. The lack of power is stifling the city's economy, and those who cannot earn enough through the legitimate economy may be lured into working with militants who roam just outside the city, once Tenula Tayo of the Institute for Security Studies.
This has now thrown a spanner in the works because it's increased the cost of doing business in the city. It's pushing some people back into poverty, and it's just affecting the general economic life in the city.
Borno State Police Commissioner Abdul Umar said officers had removed explosive devices from the roads to improve security, which would enable repairs. Nigerian oil company NNPC has also promised to build a 50-megawatt gas-fired power plant in Maiduguri to cut the reliance on transmission lines. But the timeline for both the transmission line repairs and the plant remains unclear.
That was Neka Chile of Reuters reporting. In East Africa, Ugandan officials say 7 suspects had been killed and 106 people detained during operations by security forces in connection with 3 suicide bombings in the capital Kampala last week. Islamic State, which is allied with an anti-Uganda rebel group, Allied Democratic Forces, claimed responsibility for the November 16th attack. 7 people, including 3 bombers, were killed and dozens more were injured. 1 police officer was among the 4 killed, while 27 out of 37 wounded were also police officers. Police did not provide details on how the 7 suspects were killed. Sudan's Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok said on Monday he has agreed to join the man who deposed him in a coup, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, to form a government in order to maintain the economic gains from the past 2 years. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called on the 2 leaders to build on the first step of the agreement and continue the transition that was interrupted by the coup last month. For more on the latest developments in Sudan, I'm joined live via Skype from Kampala, Uganda, by Toba Bassi, chairman and co-founder, Sudan Liberation Movement, and former fellow at African Union Department of Political Affairs. Mr. Bassi, great to have you on Africa 54.
Thank you for having me, Esther.
Were you surprised that Abdallah Hamdok would join the man who deposed him and detained him to now form a new government?
Well, I wasn't surprised in the first place because the cohabitation arrangement that was born out of the negotiation between the CFF and the military council, the 2 years has shown indicators that these people are not willing to cooperate and put Sudan on the track of transition into a democratic state. And what happened, it was a shock to the world. But, you know, the security committee of Bashir, that is led by the coup leader Burhan and his deputy, they were working the last 2 years to change the status quo in the country and to make that huge U-turn that we've all seen. But for Hamdok to accept that one, it was a serious U-turn from the track of civilian-led transitional Sudan that we all expected. Unfortunately, he disappointed us.
So Hamdok is now being accused by the protesters of selling out the revolution. Will his reinstatement to this government stop the protesters from demanding a civilian government in Sudan?
Well, it was clear that the people are not into Hamdok in person as much as people wanted people's power, that people want to see a civilian government that is promised to work on certain benchmark to dismantle the legacy of 30 years of the Bashir's regime and to put the infrastructure for democratic transition and establish the rule of law. This is what caused the general to depose the civilian-led government, and he has created a new dispensation. This dispensation is not taking people anywhere other than taking us back to the dark ages of totalitarian.
Bassey, very briefly, military leaders are not known to take orders from civilians. Who will be telling who what between Hamdok and Al-Burhan now?
That is very clear from the day when the FFC's mistake was having this cohabitation arrangement with the military in the first place, because their role is not to govern, their role is to protect, their role is to secure the country. Being involved in politics, that it has created this dilemma now, and there is a total unconstitutional situation. So.
Right, Toba, we're going to have to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for your insight, Toba. Bassey is chairman and co-founder Sudan Liberation Movement and former fellow at African Union's Department of Political Affairs. He joined us live from Kampala, Uganda. Militiamen in northeastern Democratic Republic of Congo killed about 20 people during an attack on displaced civilians. According to the government, fighters from the Codeco militia raided the village of Drodro on Sunday night. Jules Gongo, a spokesperson for Ituri's military government, told Reuters on Monday. He said they killed 12 civilians, 6 of them children. Patrick Muyaya, the spokesperson for the international government, later said on Twitter that the death toll stood at around 20. Repeated attacks by Codeco have killed hundreds in Ituri province's Jugu territory since 2017 and forced thousands to flee their homes, according to the United Nations. A Kenyan government directive that residents must show proof of COVID-19 vaccination by December 21st to access services has been welcomed by some businesses. However, others say the country's low vaccination rates make it unrealistic. David Doyle has more.
Franklin Odhiambo has only recently started welcoming customers back to his Nairobi restaurant. But now Kenya's government has announced that from December 21st, proof of COVID-19 vaccination will be required to access public services. And that includes eateries. Odhiambo fears he may once again be required to turn people away.
For me to try and tell these customers that we can't have you because of perhaps you don't have, or you've been vaccinated maybe once, there is a second dose you need to go to, I'll tell you go away and come back another time. I don't think that's going to be practical.
Under the government's directive, public services including schools, transportation and immigration will be affected, as well as hotels, bars, restaurants, national parks and wildlife reserves. But just 8.8% of the population is fully inoculated. Last month, the government lifted a curfew that had been in place since March 2020. Shoeshiner Winnie Buyong said the government should have carried out a more aggressive immunisation campaign before lifting the lockdown.
Because with or without the vaccine, we all still have to wear our masks. I don't understand why they want to make our lives more difficult.
Buyong and Odhiambo aren't the only ones with concerns. Rights group Amnesty International said Kenya would not be able to vaccinate the majority of its population in time for the deadline, putting people's ability to earn a living, access transport or go to school at risk. Directives about vaccines have split public opinion worldwide. Some say the measures infringe on personal choice, others that they protect the public. Carol Kariuki, chief executive of the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, which claims more than 500,000 members, said the group encouraged all Kenyans to get inoculated to protect people's health as well as business continuity and the economy. The Kenyan government has said it will start a 10-day mass vaccination campaign on Friday.
David Doyle, Reuters filed that report. The U.S. aims to raise COVID-19 vaccine production by more than 1 billion doses in 2022. The intended increase in effort and manufacturing comes as U.S. lawmakers are questioning inequities in global vaccine distribution and vaccination rates among richer and poorer nations. VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson has more.
The U.S. effort to vaccinate the world, providing more than 235 million vaccine doses to over 100 countries to date, with more to come announced Wednesday.
We have proudly donated more doses than all other countries combined. We will continue and must continue to donate more and more doses. Currently, we're donating 1.2 billion doses to the world. This includes the U.S. government's groundbreaking deal to deliver 1 billion donated doses of Pfizer vaccine to countries in need through COVAX.
But this announcement follows months of pressure on the Biden administration to step up the effort. Even Democratic lawmakers are questioning why the White House has not done more to close the vaccine gap between rich and poor countries.
Even as many of us in the United States are receiving booster shots, fewer than 5% of people in low-income countries have received a single dose. By some estimates, many people in low-income nations will not have access to a vaccination until 2023 without significant increases in worldwide vaccine production and distribution.
U.S. health experts say that while vaccination rates in North America and Europe are at about 50%, those rates drop to as low as 10% in Africa.
What is the problem? What's the bottleneck? And are we getting any better with countries where there are, quite frankly, the descendants of Africa? Because once again, we see the inequities in Black and brown countries throughout the world.
Even though the U.S. has delivered 50 million vaccines to Latin America and the Caribbean, lawmakers say the Biden administration's efforts have lagged too far behind.
Russia delivered its first vaccines in February of 2021. China made its first delivery in March of 21. And President Biden's administration didn't deliver vaccines until June.
Health experts tell lawmakers the U.S. is just now catching up because of a number of factors.
It was the priority that we had to give to domestic requirements. Secondly, that we went through rigorous procedures to make sure that anything that we donated was safe and reliable.
One possible turning point for fighting COVID-19 globally, Pfizer announced Thursday it would allow generic drug manufacturers to produce its antiviral pill for lower and middle income countries.
I think we're going to have significant quantities of antiviral vaccines plus the antiviral. It's the first time I can sit here and I'm beginning to see a way we can get this under control. Not eliminate, not get rid of the virus entirely.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration began consideration of emergency authorization for that pill this week. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
Still to come, why some Africans praise China's investment in Africa despite the debt burden it comes with. But first, here's Heidi Adams with what's coming up on Wednesday's Straight Talk Africa.
Be sure to join me on the next Straight Talk Africa as we discuss the return of Africa's stolen art. France has repatriated 26 looted colonial-era artifacts to Benin. Now museums in Europe and the US are rethinking what to do with their African art collections. We'll speak to artists and museum curators about the colonial past of Africa's art and its future around the world. Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has announced new initiatives aimed at supporting scientific innovations. The foundation is committing an initial $50 million to support science and innovation in the Global South during a 10-year program with awards in science leadership fellowships to 14 African scientists. The announcement was made during the 2021 annual Grand Challenges meeting, which brings together funding and research partners. For more insight, Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu spoke with Dr. Trevor Mando, president of the Global Health Division at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
The Grand Challenges has been a cluster of that we've had, which culminates every year in the Grand Challenges meeting. And we've had 17 of those in 11 different countries. Actually, just before the current pandemic crisis, our last live meeting was in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia in 2019. Scientists come from across the globe. There's a particularly strong representation from scientists from lower and middle income countries. Beyond the scientists, we have a lot of government representation, we have regulators, we have companies that join. It really is probably the session at which everybody who has an interest in advancing global health comes to the meeting in some form or other or gets involved.
What can you tell us in terms of the sorts of impact that have been seen over the years?
There have been a couple of interesting actual innovations that did come out of those. For instance, an ability to fight against mosquito-borne diseases with this intervention which is known as Wolbachia, which impacts the Aedes mosquito, and that came out of one of the early Grand Challenges. We had an initiative called the Grand Challenges Exploration, where essentially anybody can write a 2-page application, and then they could get $250,000 to implement the idea. And we've had all manner of interesting ideas. We had an initiative around improving the condom. All kinds of unusual scientific explorations have been held through this Grand Challenges Exploration. And it's pulled in a lot of people, even secondary school pupils have been able to submit projects.
The fact that it is in the midst of COVID-19, how has the priority shifted this year?
So we have these two themes which are interlinked. One, which is recovery from the pandemic. How do we recover to a better place than we've been? It's not just the direct COVID-related issues, but all of the other global health silent epidemics, HIV, TB. And then also, how do we build an ecosystem that really focuses on local R&D that's led in a very gender equitable way and would advance the cause of preventing any kind of lock on resources or groups and regions and countries not having access to both the scientific tools and the actual products that they need.
The Gates Foundation is committing this year an initial $50 million towards a new 10-year program to support science and innovation in the Global South. Why this new support towards science and innovation?
We've been investing in science and innovation since the really initiation of the foundation. Often the direct recipients have not been in the countries that we are actually working in. And we want to redirect that to have more direct investment in people in country who are often doing the real work. We want to be sure that those people are directly supported. And, that's why this Calestis Juma fellowships, the 14 that we'll initiate now, I think will start to change that dynamic.
We see in this initiative that there is a specific focus on empowering female scientists.
Within the countries, women face particular barriers, an additional set of factors in terms of how people look at women in science. So we think that there's a need for a very special effort to select a very promising woman. I mean, you just have to think about the mRNA vaccine and Caitlin Carrico, who worked so, fearlessly from the 1990s on a project that everybody tried to block her from. That application has to save the entire globe, but certainly has been instrumental in combating coronavirus. So we think that there is a cohort of exceptionally promising women scientists out there in lower-income countries that we want to identify and we want to support.
When this initiative is launched, what do you hope to see?
The notion is really that we should support them over a longer time frame. So essentially each of the recipients receives $1 million over 5 years. That is to invest in their research, in the materials that they need, in the local infrastructure. So we'll be watching very carefully how the first 14 cohort progress and what their funding needs are and the blocks that they may experience.
What else should we look forward to this year?
What we saw with COVID was the need to track these variants of the virus which arose. And the situation in Africa was that there were about 5,000 sequences of COVID viruses in the international database that was collecting them at a time when there were almost 600,000 samples in there. So 5,000 from Africa in January. And fortuitously, we had kicked off an initiative with the Africa CDC, which was around an African Pathogen Genomics Institute that would increase sequencing in Africa. And we had 20 sites. And they quickly turned to sequencing COVID, so that in October, we had 50,000 specimens. There's a step beyond that we're going to invest in, which is that how do you know whether it is significant, it's going to evade the immune system of people, it's going to be particularly dangerous? You need a set of additional tools. So we've selected 7 sites, 5 of the 7 in Africa, where we're going to provide $7 million over the next 2 years to quickly put in place those immunological monitoring tools, which will give additional ability to be able to track what's going on with the COVID variants or any other variants that may arise.
Thank you so much, Trevor Mondal. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Lenord.
The Grand Challenges is a group of initiatives seeking to engage innovators worldwide in addressing the most pressing global health and development challenges. Economists say China's model of investment in Africa is gaining public support despite the debt burden it imposes on many countries. According to economic experts and the locals, the United States' multi-billion-dollar investments in Africa are less visible and make less of an impact on people's daily lives. Here's Victoria Munga with more from Nairobi.
Catherine Kiura's electronic business is one of thousands in Kenya that distributes products from both China and Western countries. Kiura says her Chinese products are moving the fastest.
There's first quality, second quality to fifth quality. So it depends with what the customer is asking for, because we will sell something that a customer wants. If it's a bulb for 30 shillings, I have. If it's a bulb for 50 shillings, I have.
Electronics is a target area of investment by Chinese companies in Africa. Locals say such investments are impacting their daily lives directly.
A lot of products we see in the shops are from China. Government projects we hear are also being run by Chinese. So even though America is investing, we haven't seen them on the ground. We hear that America has done this and that, but we haven't seen them at the grassroots.
Economists say the model of investment by foreign countries is key in the competition for influence across Africa.
China has followed its money in. Whenever it's invested, unlike other lenders, it's actually followed its projects with the engineers, sometimes even to an extreme of having even their own workers. But then that's resulted in is you've had a very visible impact.
During his 3-nation tour of Africa last week, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said his country is investing in the continent without imposing unsustainable levels of debt. Wahoro told VOA that distinction is an important one.
If you look in the overall picture of the debt stock, and by this I mean other types of debt beyond commercial, because China's been mainly commercial debt, the West is still ahead in terms of actual dollars on the ground, and also because if you include the Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank and the IMF, then the totality of that bilateral and multilateral institutions, you could say the West is still, this is still the West's space.
In a bid to strengthen relations with Africa, the White House has announced it will host an African Leaders Summit in 2022. Victoria Amunga for VOA News, Nairobi.
13 cultural artifacts stolen a century and a half ago following a battle between the British and Ethiopian empires have returned to Ethiopia following months of negotiations. Clara Frank has more.
After a century and a half away, 13 stolen Ethiopian artifacts have returned home. The items, according to officials, are part of the largest act of restitution in Ethiopia's history, repatriated following months of negotiations. They were put on show in Addis Ababa at the weekend at a press conference with Tourism Minister Nasise Chala.
Our country's ancient civilization, history, artifacts, fingerprints of indigenous knowledge, culture and value have been looted through war and smuggled out illegally. At this moment, countless treasures of ours are found in various countries' museums, research institutes, and in the hands of individuals.
These particular items, including an ornate processional cross and a richly colored triptych depicting the crucifixion of Jesus, were taken in 1868 after the Battle of Magdala between the British and Ethiopian empires. Teferi Meles, Ethiopia's UK ambassador, said many of the treasures were located in Britain.
It was not possible to return all of them. However, these treasures are the biggest so far in number and in kind. This is the first time this quantity of treasure is returned home.
But the work is far from over. Teferi said Ethiopia is negotiating with the British Museum for the returns of 12 tablets. They are replicas of the Ark of the Covenant and are sacred in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. British museums have long resisted campaigns for the return of artworks, often citing legislation that bans them from disposing of their collections. But pressure has increased, and last year the British Museum said it would loan some works to Nigeria for a new museum due to open in 2023. The restitution also comes as a conflict between Ethiopia's federal government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front continues to rage. Teferi warned that cultural artifacts are being destroyed and looted in the fighting,
saying that without the treasures, there is no history.
Clara Frank, Washington.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From the Africa 54 team here in Washington, thanks for watching.